believe in freedom cannot rest.
In freedom cannot rest. You believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We'll believe
Introduce the event and the necessity of it. Thank you again for being here with us today, Dr. Akil. Shall we begin?
Well, welcome everyone. Geneva, from wherever you came from. We're really excited that you're here, and as who knows, we really want this to be a home for not just for members, but for activists and where we're listening to specific issues of the quality that we're talking for. So we're here at the Women's International Weekly Focus on Freedom, and just let's stay in touch. That's it. Thank you.
All right. So as you guys know, we're here at the third session for the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. And it is essential that we bring our global allies to this table to help us advocate with us, alongside us, that help bring the infrastructure, that help demobilize and deconstruct white supremacy, capitalism, and all of these systems from the inside out. I am thankful that you've hosted us today. This is just a small window into the type of support that WILF offers to activists, artists, and peace builders around the world. And so thank you again. We're going to snack. And before I introduce Dr. Akil Khalfani, I just want to make sure that we all join. We are the rhythm people. In the beginning was heart drum. With this vibration, we gave rhythm to the world. On this beat, we sing life. We are the rhythm people. And so this is your opportunity to join in with me. You all know about Sweet Honey in the Rock. I'm sure that you're familiar with their words from Ella Baker's famous song. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Those that are building capitalism, the militarization of our world, those that are in reinforcing white supremacy and the systems that uphold it, they don't take breaks. So we cannot break. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Come on, y'all, rhythm people. Sing it with me. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Sing that song with you when you get weary, when your movements are underfunded, under-resourced, under-publicized, when you show up at the front lines for peace and freedom. Remember your strength. Don't get worried. My people, we are weary and worn. We have built every institution in the United States. We were the first stock on Wall Street. And yet I sit with you today and I watch the efforts of my grandmother and my grandfather being undone in real time. All of the history that helped pillar American history. The Civil Rights Movement, a book is there, we'll talk about that. The Negro spirituals that fortified my people in the fields as they worked in the cotton industries, in the textiles that I don't want to cry. No need for tears today. I see I'm invoking that. What I want to mention today is that we cannot rest. And now it's time for us to ally with organizations like WILF that are right across the street from the United Nations, just a convenient walk. to leverage their human rights activists and resources to get on the ground level, to learn about issues affecting global African people, to understand the interconnected conversation between WILF sections 19 in Africa and the Black women in WILF sections in USA, to understand that our fight is the same, that white supremacy is a global system of domination. We can no longer divide our narratives. It's the same story. Here with us as an expert, we have Dr. Akil Khalfani. Dr. Akil, are you still with us?
Yes, indeed, I am here.
Today, Dr. Akil, if you'll look inside of our program, he's gonna, now that we finish our introduction, he's gonna talk to you a little about the history that's brought us here. He's gonna talk to you about the importance of critical race theory. Right now, they're saying it's illegal to teach about the history of my people. They're saying that it's illegal to celebrate our resilience and how far we've come. Dr. Akil?
Yes. Are we on?
We are on.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me to join you. I want to thank Kim and the Teaching Artists Network and Wilk and all protocols observed. We appreciate your engagement in the struggle for transformation and the upliftment of people of African descent. I am the director of the Africana Institute at Essex County College and a professor of sociology and African studies, as well as the director of the Center for Global Education and Experiences. In addition to that, I've pushed forward on some of these things. I ran for U.S. Congress here in the U.S. a couple of times, and I'm part of several international organizations striving to uplift people of African descent and to build a Pan-Africanist movement, and working on the Pan-Africanist movement that's already going. So really not building it, but just moving the needle forward in the vein of Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois and a whole host of other brothers and sisters who've pushed forward in this pursuit of transformation and upliftment. So as we are here today, I want to also just recognize that I'm appreciative to be here, and it looks like me and Brother Haki are the only men in the room that I see in a group of women.
No, we've got Brother Daquan here.
Okay, good. Wonderful. Well, I'm glad. But in that context, I just wanted to honor the presence of the women who invite us into this space to address these issues. As the way I work in this, the things that I do is that we have to be balanced in what we do. We have to find balance, or ma'at, which is ancient Egyptian or Kemetic word for truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order. And so that's the space in which I operate. And as I've traveled around the globe and assessed things and looked at them, and as a professor of sociology, I teach about critical race theory, and I'll just say that the usage of that term is basically taken out of context, right? And so that it is been transformed and redeveloped for the usage of somebody else's ideas, so that when you hear that term, that we don't want critical race theory in the United States, in certain places, such as in Florida and other places where I believe Sister Kim has given you all some of the basic breakdown of some of the things that have gone on, at least in the literature that I received. I believe you all might have received the same, that has some explanation about the laws and things of that nature that have been enacted to prevent even the discussion of what it means to struggle for liberation, freedom, and upliftment, and to address issues of race and racial differentiation. Sometimes when we're talking about race, folks want to talk about it from the perspective of that they're colorblind, and I understand the tone and the tone and the nature of that. However, if you look behind me in this beautiful painting by Wabembe, you'll see that it's not a monochrome. So those of us who say that we don't see color is that actually we're blind to color. So we're not colorblind. There's no such thing as that. Even persons who are colorblind, they see some colors. They just don't see all of them. And I want to just suggest to you that that it is a deflection, an attempt to redirect the attention from self. And so when folks say that I'm just human, I agree. We're all human, but we're human in the context of our relationship to all the things around us. So that we're human and Swiss and human and African and human and European and human and Japanese and human and brothers and human and sisters. And so then we exist in all of our dynamism. And my common refrain is that we should build on our similarities and celebrate our differences. That way, you don't have to critique anyone for a difference. You have to learn as we say in sociology, that we want to look at things from a cultural relativist perspective. That is, we want to look at things from a perspective where we're able to see things from the eyes of those who are coming from that particular cultural, religious, ethnic background, and we don't have to be ethnocentric in our endeavors to do so, which means that we are ethnocentric, meaning that you are suggesting that your own ideas, beliefs, and cultural systems are superior to someone else, as opposed to being different. And as we look at it from those perspectives, it gives us more um, uh, depth and breadth to understand things. It's like looking at something from the past and you look at it ahistorically. Well, ahistorical means that you're looking at the past with today's eyes. And you can do so, but it biases what you look at. And that when you bias it in that way, you can't fully understand or appreciate what was going on. It doesn't mean that you have to accept or agree, but you put in context the things that are going on. And the other part of that is that we've got to look at the things that we're looking at from a holistic perspective and a broad historical perspective. We oftentimes want to look at things from our own lens and to see how we see things. But if we really wanted to in-depthly understand African history, for instance, that we must understand world history, because African history exists in the histories of the world. And so then that gives us the kind of context for understanding the impact of the world on Africa and the impact of the Africa on the world. And so we're looking at the development of the movement of African people, both by choice and by force throughout the world. And we're striving to understand what does that mean and how does it play itself out. And so as we look at that, we have to first recognize that, well, African people have been around for tens of thousands of years and have been moving for tens of thousands of years. And so then you find remains of Africans in Brazil that are 9,000 years old. And you say, oh, they weren't there recently, right? And these are not my digs. These are the digs of archaeologists who found those remains there. You look in other places and you find the historical remains. You find pottery, you find ships, you find lots of artifacts of Africans, of Asians, of Europeans all over the world. And so then it tells you that these folks who are here have been here and that they found multiplicity of ways to move and to migrate. And then if we marry that with the forced removal of folks, Africans, through the Arab slave trade and through the European slave trade, then we begin to build on that narrative, and we look at who were the impactful folks that caused those traumas to occur. Who created the conditions for those prisoners of wars, which some folks will articulate with those, the descendants of slaves, they call them prisoners of war. And if we look at the history of the movement of folks in that regard, that's what in fact was going on, that these people were moving and that they were in warfare sometimes maybe with some of their own folks, but also predominantly with Europeans who embarked upon what we call chattel slavery, which was a form of enslavement that made people to become the equivalent to property, to a cow, to a wheelbarrow, to a hammer. And so that history is the thing that we're building on. And when you're talking about the ideas of critical race theory, it's looking at that narrative. And it was a group of lawyers, Kim Crenshaw, Derek Bell, and a bunch of others, who came up with this tool. And the tool partially was designed for lawyers. Those folks were lawyers, and these lawyers were trying to figure out, how do you win cases in courts where the majority of the jurors are Europeans or European Americans. And I say European Americans, other folks say white, who don't necessarily understand the social, cultural, political conditions of people of African descent. And so therefore those cases were very difficult to win, because people didn't empathize or understand the conditions that brought about certain situations. And so then they moved to the process of doing storytelling, and storytelling helped them in those cases to talk about racial differentiation, racial oppression, and ultimately could be used for gender discrimination and other things. But primarily that race was a tool that they had to find ways to adjudicate and to argue about, and to find ways to articulate those experiences. And so once we get to a place of that, you have a flipping of the script of saying that critical race theory is the imposition of a race-based narrative to cause harm, and or that causes harm to European American or white children and other folks. And so that's where the pushback has become. And so then the pushback, I would argue, to a certain extent, is the fear of those who were the oppressors and tormentors, the rapers and robbers in the 60s and the 50s, and even into the 70s, who were doing heinous things. And there's pictures of lots of those people. And so you wouldn't want to have your child in school seeing their grandmother or their grandfather being the one that's spitting or pouring something on somebody's head, or even their mother or their father. And so that time is not so distant from us that wouldn't be possible, that somebody's parent, somebody's grandparent might be in a picture where at a lynching and celebrating at that point. And so then to not have that picture shown in school where somebody's grandchild or great grandchild might see grandma or great grandpa doing things that are heinous, that the children might not understand, that they don't want to have them see that. And they don't want to conscientize folks who don't understand that, who don't have a recent memory of it. Like those of us who were raised in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that they were now raised in the 90s and the 2000 and 2010, and they don't have a recollection of those experiences. And so they're now in high school and in college, and they themselves may want to distance themselves from the past of Jim Crow, the past of enslavement, the past of convict leasing, the past of all of these atrocities that happened to African people, and even some with immigrant and Native American populations. And so since they're trying to distance themselves from those things, and both those who are the descendants of the oppressed and those the descendants of the oppressors, that you come up with a space where folks are, if you don't have an understanding of something, you can't, even yourself, who your grandparents might have been the victims, you don't understand, you can't empathize with them because you have no relationship to it. And it looks harsh and heinous to you, so therefore you don't want to associate with it. So then you have a large group of folks who agree with the Republicans in the United States who are suggesting that we need to have this kind of literature or this kind of legislation. and to push back away from certain things. But it's because of the ignorance of the folks who are pushing these movements and creating the context for sustained oppression. And as our sister Kim said, rolling back the, excuse me, uh, rolling back the struggles of those in the 60s, and not just of African Americans, but African Americans, Latinos, European Americans, Asians, all who fought for the movement of the needle from the oppressive days of genocidal activity that was going on to now a new level of it. And so that's why you have sisters, people like our dear sister who wrote the book, The New Jim Crow. She talks about that's Michelle Alexander. She talks about that we have the number of imprisoned folks have increased dramatically in the United States since the 70s, and so the question becomes, well, you just have more African people who are criminals. Well, the reality is that there's laws that have changed that have criminalized people of African descent, that have criminalized their activities, and when other people do those same activities, that their activities are not criminalized, their behaviors are not criminalized in the same way. So that's why we have differences in sentencing, differences in incarceration, differences in reincarceration. So by reincarceration, I mean recidivism, so that people get cyclical imprisonment and incarceration. And so then those things happen because of some of the laws that came up, the 3 strikes you're out, the Rockefeller drug laws, the mandatory minimum sentencing. All these things are the things that have created a condition where it said that these people are criminal and we need to do more harsh things. And this all comes from the Nixon era, Nixon and Ronald Reagan, up to the present, including the legislation that was pushed by Bill Clinton. All of these different levels, all the way from the Nixon era, these are the levels at which high levels of incarceration and criminalization of the existence of African people has meted itself out. And so we are looking to find and strive for ways to mitigate those things, to come up with strategies that push back against those things, with strategies that create a different reality in terms of our understanding and the implications of how white supremacy continues to play itself out in ways that have ongoing negative impact. And then we have to look at the multiplicity of levels at which that happens. And so I teach about looking at intersectionality between race, class, and gender, and the many ways that plays itself out as well. So when you're looking at race, class, and gender, that those things we fight. Here we're in the presence of a women's organization that's been around for a very long time. If we're not fighting to challenge racism in sexism or social class differentiation in sexism, then they begin to pop their ugly heads back up down the road. And we think we've addressed gender discrimination. However, it pops its heads back up in other ways, in socioeconomic differentiation. It pops its ugly head back up in race discrimination and other modalities. And so even in ageism. So we've got to think about lots of ways and being holistic in what we do and how we do what we do. I don't know how much time I have, but I'm a professor, so you'll have to find a way to cut me off.
The knowledge. If the knowledge is what you want, he will bring it. So what he's saying is that we have so much in common. The same way that they're deciding that women are no longer allowed to determine what they do with their own bodies, right? We fought, we built, and now we need to build protections for what we build so that these things aren't undone, because our ancestors want us to remember. Amnesia is a disease. How could we ever forget what they did? And the disgrace or the embarrassment that they don't want their children to see in the history books is how we're going to make sure they never repeat it. They can never forget what they did, so that we build a future that is better than the existence we live in now, especially when these situations continue to exist. They continue to perpetuate themselves. George Floyd was only 2020. Breonna Taylor was 4 years ago. This is not ancient history. The prison industrial complex, he mentioned Michelle Alexander. We're talking about the now. And so now you not only want to be embarrassed by the past, but you want us to live in an illusion, walking into the future. We can't allow it. And that's why we have two special guests here with us to tell you how we are being a part of the solution. It's not enough to say what's wrong and what we are against. Somebody has to tell us how it can be. Someone has to actualize the world we want to live in by practicing it today. Octavia Butler, she's an incredible author. She has a book called The Parable of the Sower. And in the first page of this book, she wrote in the 1990s. She starts in this future world, and it's 2024 in that future world where Octavia Butler is living. And on the first page, she says, everything you touch changes, and everything you change changes you. When we learned about the work of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, we realized that it had been far too long in our organization since we actively and intentionally reached out to our allies. At no point in our history as Black people and brown people in the United States did we look in our movements to the left or to the right and not see our allies with us. When I think about this book here, that talks about our emancipation from enslavement, we always had John Brown. We can never forget in Harper's Ferry, Maryland. Maryland is the state where I'm born, the story of John Brown and how he died and put his life on the line, standing up against the enslavement. I'll never forget during the civil rights movement, when they walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge it's not Montgomery, Alabama. Selma, Alabama. Listen, it's a big state. In Selma, Alabama, there was a priest who lost his life walking across that bridge. And so my question becomes, who amongst us now in this day and age are going to reach across to our allies and remind us that we who believe in freedom cannot rest? Come on, y'all, this is interactive. Wake up now. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Yes, so we're going to move on to our next speaker. Dr. Akil Khalfani, he in a lot of ways encompassed not only the definition of the critical race theory, but also a historical overview. And so I'm real anxious. You know, creators, artists, we're the doers. We want to make it happen. So I'm real anxious to get forward into how we're changing this paradigm and how we are preserving our identity and working in institutions to do that. So before I show a quick video, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Incredible, incredible work that they've been doing for many generations, speaking to the mass incarceration of our people. We call this beauty in an ugly place, because the resilience of Black and brown people in the United States is what created jazz music. It's what created the blues, hip hop. From our hoods, we were like reporters from the hood. And so we continue to use these outlets to create beauty in ugly places. One of those ugly places, the prison system. It's big business, but the stories that come out of that are what, in many ways, are one of the most important conversations happening at the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. Because when we talk about them changing legislation, like the Florida Stay Woke Act, they don't want to teach us. What they're also doing inside of our classrooms is they're creating a school to prison pipeline. Not only do they not want to teach what happened historically, they want us to also create a system that has Black and brown young people ready for prison as a commodity by the time they're in the third grade. They have tests that they give to third graders, 8 years old, and they build jails based on the test scores of third graders. So not only do they want to not teach the history that will balance us, that will remind us of our greatness, like Dr. Akil said, that is beyond slavery, that is a part of world history, African art and culture. They also want us to forget that, the collective amnesia. They also want to prepare our children to be commodities in their capitalistic systems through the school to prison pipeline. And so we have with us here today advocates against the mass incarceration of our people and systems to support those that are caught in that system. Could you speak to that?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm honored to be a part. Whenever Kim calls, I try to come. I usually say no to a lot of people, but she does some very important work. My name is Tamako Shine. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I'm the founding director of Asian People in Prison Human Rights Campaign. What we have today here, when Kim is talking about, and she's framing culture genocide, anytime you have a people that's been enslaved, taken from their mother Africa, from one continent to another, and then they're on the plantations, and then you have racialized laws, and you have, this is all to invisibilize their humanity. This is to take their memory of who they were and who they are to become. And so prison is one of the effects, the affects of white supremacy racism. And so if you have generations of people over time who are constantly being incarcerated, what you do, you begin to forget, right? This is an attack and assault on the memory, but also this is an attack on the soul of the African woman's womb. Anything that comes out of her womb has been decimated, it has tried to be destroyed, it has been assaulted. And so the work we do, we work to get people out of prison who've been in 30, 40, 50, 64 years. We have people, we have 3 generations of men and women in one family incarcerated in the same prison. Grandfathers, fathers, sons. This is normal. We have 2 million people incarcerated, over half of them look like me. It's important that we do this work because for our people incarcerated in prison, this is genocide. These folks are incarcerated so long that they cannot reproduce. And so we bring our case to the world stage. Here this week we're at the third permanent forum of African descent, and we're saying that no more will the children of Mother Africa be incarcerated, no more will they be confined. Sorry. I get emotional when I come to these types of international spaces. I have my people here all the way from the diaspora. We're talking about this because you can still feel the spirits. They haunt us, our people who was in these chains, who jumped over the ships, who was on the plantations, and their children today continue to be chained. And so we must continue this fight. Our people, we must free them. And so this prison system is a part of the militarization, the industrial complex of what we see there. And this is about power. This is about an oppression of power, a stoppage of power, containment of power, because the African woman gave the world civilization. And so anything that comes out of her womb, if you can incarcerate, put chains around her womb, then we can be stopped, but we will not be stopped. And this is why it's so important, as Kim sings that song, we believe in freedom, we cannot rest. It's important that we sing that song, we send the vibrations and rhythms up to the ancestors. We send them up to the spirits, and then we bring them into the room right now. George Jackson. We bring him in, we bring him into the room. Ella Fitzgerald, Ella Vick, we bring him into the room. El Haj Malik Shabazz, we bring him into the room. We bring him into the room. We bring all these people into the room. Huey Newton, we bring him into the room. We bring him into the room. We bring him into the room because we're saying that they're saying we have not finished our work. We have not finished our work. We have not finished our work. We want our children to be free. We want freedom for them right now, and it will get done. And so that's what brings us here today. And so what's our next assignment? To not stop. To not stop. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you for being here. There are so many connections. This is just different manifestations of the same expression. And so when you look around the table, look to your left and look to your right, you are what your ancestors dreamed about, but you are also what your children will read about. Make sure that you're on the right side of history. You are the book. You're writing it right now. What do you want it to say? What do you want to teach? So we're going to move into the importance of cultural recognition with our brother Daquan Lawrence. Daquan joins us from Howard University. We call Howard the Mecca. In the US, we have institutions that are laser focused on promoting and preserving the African identity and the expressions of that, the historic Black college and universities. Daquan's matriculation is an example of what those institutions produce and the important nature of making sure that we perpetuate those institutions and what they teach. Daquan.
One, it's an honor, I would say, a privilege to just be here in the presence of so many people who I think are dedicated to humanity. That's how I try to look at it. It's a lot of different connections and ways I could go with things that were just said. Again, thank you to the people who are here with us, physically, virtually, and even spiritually. I think as everybody we have come to realize. I'm personally affected or impacted by a product of things that we talked about from incarceration. My grandfather was incarcerated. My father was incarcerated for several years of my life. And I actually still haven't met my one grandfather that is alive due to his incarceration and I guess the fracturing of my family. But I say that to say that I'm originally from Harlem, New York. Was born into foster care by an orphan mother. And my parents were teenagers when they had me. So I say that to give context of me being somewhat of a talking statistic, living statistic, if you will, for people that are into data. Everything's analytics and data driven now. Maybe it was always, but I think I would just start there. As Sister Kim said, so now I'm bringing to modern, contemporary society. Currently at Howard, completing my doctoral degree in African studies. And I think, again, it's very, it's a couple of different words. It's a lot of words I want to say, but I think it's very apt. I think it's very appropriate that I'm at Howard in Washington, D.C. because of what Howard represents. Howard is actually the second historically Black college that I attended and matriculated at. I started at the illustrious Morgan State University, as we call it, in Baltimore, Maryland, which I believe has a revolutionary school of thought, as much as, if not more than Howard, because Howard is a private school. And Howard is now the second private school that I attended because after I went to Morgan State, I received my master's in international public policy at Johns Hopkins. But I say that just to say, like, for me, education has kind of been like my conduit or my tool because I grew up on welfare, grew up in social services. A lot of different things happened to my mother. And I have, 7 sisters. So I say that just to, say it again, like, to me, there's a lot of things I want to say, but I'm gonna try to stagger my thoughts and then be brief. Think as we all know, women are not only important and integral to everything in society, but I think women are like the reason, like, for everything. And as the brother said, I believe Dr. Akil, my and balance is important. And I think that somehow, some way, both women and especially men, like, we've somehow forgotten that. Whether it's because of erasure, we're talking about laws that are erasing African American culture, African culture, but that happens in so many different ways. And as I tell my story, I'm a human rights activist. So when I talk about human rights, a lot of men, this is to say this, they always say, like, oh, which one, which issue do you advocate for, which issue is important to you? And to me, I always find that funny because I'm like, all of them. When I say human rights, I'm like, it's not one, right? Like, it's all of these rights. There's social rights. When you get into it, there's social, political, economic, cultural rights. When we're talking about institutions like the UN, the way things are codified and kind of categorized, there's so many different categories where you have to be nuanced and well-versed. But even if you don't, have a degree, and formal education is just as important as formal education. So to me, it's like, again, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the people in my family who didn't go to college, who didn't graduate from college, who didn't finish their high school diploma, who didn't obtain a high school diploma and finish the high school matriculation. So to me, education, which comes from the root word educe or educe, means to bring out whatever lies dormant inside the individual and the person. And as Sister Kim said again, as creators, As artists, I think it's important that we recognize, going back to women who are natural creators, that we are all creators and we're all given that the spirit and the ability to create, and just to kind of tie and weave everything together. As I was making the point, I think again, all rights of all people are important. And as you mentioned, John Brown and other allies, as we call them, I think that this is another, what do I want to say, socialized or politicized way of looking at it. Again, I like to look at humanity as a baseline. And when we talk about critical race theory, which has, I guess, racial components, race is a social construct. This is, again, based on pseudoscience that comes from, French and German philosophers and sociologists, as different things happen and transpire throughout the 18th and 19th and 20th century. So again, with that context and with that understanding, for me, it's like, depending on who I'm engaging and what they're aware of, again, I would have to advocate a different way. Whether, again, it's just an African-American individual, whether it's somebody in Africa, whether, again, it's a Black woman, whether it's a white woman. To me, again, I don't, going back to it, again, as brother said, I don't necessarily look at it as being colorblind, but I think I'm very critical. And at one point, I actually wanted to get a shirt made that said "Race is fake." My friends told me not to because I would piss off a lot of Black people. And it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to, eliminate the use of race and racism and racialism, but I wanted to highlight that, again, it is pseudoscience that has been legitimized via laws, and now these same laws are trying to overturn and erase different aspects of society. So I say all of that just to get into, like I said, I wanted to be brief. I think the most important thing to do, going back to the camaraderie, comrades, politically speaking, the left is the middle to me, so I'm like way off the deep end. It's so crazy, like how, again, like if I really could be myself. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm an egalitarian, and I think that egalitarianism is something that we may not pick that aspect from Ella Jo Baker or a Malcolm X or a Robert Sobukwe in South Africa, where I do my research, which is where I'm doing for my dissertation right now, where gender-based violence is so rampant. And again, all these different things they're systematic plans, if you will. And they call people conspiracy theorists when they talk about this, but to conspire means to plan. So these things are planned. So again, if you say somebody's a conspiracy theorist, that's actually possibly a positive thing, because you're saying that these people are highlighting how these things are planned and how they're all interconnected. So I say that just to say, again, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate what we're doing here. And I think, to me, the next step, after not stopping, I think is to brand activism and to brand human rights and to brand the work that scholars are doing, academics are doing, creators are doing, individuals like yourselves are doing, to make it quote unquote cool. I think for whatever reason we don't look at these things as cool. And again, growing up, while I was in Morgan,
Okay, just experienced some technical difficulties. I will stand by. May not be on our end. We are broadcasting live from Geneva, Switzerland, with Teaching Artists Institute. So we'll stand by for just a second. Hopefully they will be back up. Okay, so we're not sure what has happened. I'm not sure if the phone died or signal. So I'll go for a couple more minutes here, but I think we have the gist of the conversation. Again, we were broadcasting live, and our brother Daquan, Dr. Daquan, was speaking from Geneva, Switzerland, from the 3rd Annual Permanent Forum for People of African Descent. And so I'll give a couple more minutes before we say see you later. But we had a good conversation. As you can see, it was a side event, so several days. I'll try to find a link to some of the other forums that will be going on so that you all can look up. So I will put that in the comments section. I'll put a link to the United Nations where you may be able to find some of the so click on that link, everyone. You may be able to see some of the actual sessions that are taking place there. And we're coming up on 9 o'clock, so it's possible that that was the end for the session, but we would like to thank Dr. Akil Khalfani and Mama Nina, who's online, Sister Kim, Brother Daquan. But thank you, Brother Dr. Akil. You got any closing remarks? I don't want to prolong. I know this was actually 2 hours, but I was told 7:30. So
No problem. Yeah,
first I was told 7, then I was told 7:30. So,
but my only closing remarks is I want to once again thank the Teaching Artists Institute. I want to thank you all again for the work you're doing and creating a pathway for us to have these kind of dialogues, and to say that I'm here ready to be engaged, involved in the transformation of our community on a global stage, to make sure that we collectively work together to bridge those gaps and to continue to uplift our people. And that I'm here. Also, I just want to mention that I'm in working in this space, that I'm working also, I'm on the organizing committee for the 9th Pan-African Congress, which is going to be held in Togo at the end of the year. So, we want to there's a youth component to that. And I believe Kim has sent that out a couple of times. So all of those spaces and places, we want people to be engaged and involved to uplift and transform the spaces around us for our future.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Well, okay, no, brother. Thank you for mentioning that. We look forward to that. In Togo, right? That's
yes, in Togo.
Yes, beautiful. I've been paying attention, and I think Kim and I met with the elder at what's the school?
Brother Inyaka.
Yeah, at his school, Lincoln.
In Lincoln
That was coming off my tip.
Yes.
Yeah. So definitely we appreciate you plugging and just being a solid, well-rounded Pan-Africanist doing the international work. So we need more elders like you in this space. So appreciate you, Baba, and enjoy the rest of your day. We shall be in touch for sure.
Yes, brother. Peace and blessings.
All right, peace and blessings. Sante Sana.